First of all, I'd like to say that I'm very, very excited to be here. Indeed, I'm inspired to be here. And what a theme, inspiration. It's something that's been a theme throughout my life and something that I'd like to share with you today. And I would like to say, having met the committee last night, I was totally inspired by the organisation and the enthusiasm of those guys. They've done such a fantastic job here of putting this together. I'm very, very, very impressed, and I'm sure you all are too. Inspire, or inspiration. Here's a few definitions: to affect, guide, or arouse, to fill with enlivening or exalting emotion, to stimulate to action. That's a good one. To motivate, to affect or touch, to draw forth, elicit, or arouse, to be the cause or source of, or to bring about. Now that's quite inspirational in itself, isn't it? And we're going to talk a bit about that. I'm not just going to talk about stunts today, but I'm going to weave part of my life as an extreme sports enthusiast and as a professional stuntman, and a future project that I'll speak to you about in a while, into inspiration. Because without inspiration, of course, none of us would do anything or achieve anything, and none of us would strive to do anything. So I hope that the examples that I've learnt through life, and some of the mistakes I've made as well along the way, and things that have inspired me, will hopefully give you food for thought. And I'm particularly aiming this at the students. Some of you will be going out into the business world. And I think inspiration is going to be important, because as you get older, some of you, if you haven't already, will have children that you'll want to inspire. If you're successful in business, you'll certainly have employees that you want to inspire, and you're going to need to be inspired yourself, especially if any of you work for yourself, as I do. If you're a freelancer or you're running your own business, you have to be inspired. This self-inspiration has to come from somewhere, and it's not always easy. Things aren't always easy if you're running your own business. So I'm hoping that some of the things that I do, although they may be alien in terms of physical danger and adrenaline and action, I hope that you'll take some of those things, and they might help you in your futures too. I don't know how many of you have seen this film, Bucket List. Quick show of hands. How many people have seen this film? Inspirational film, would you say? Most people, I think you would agree. Very inspirational film. For those of you that haven't seen it, this is a great film. I only watched it a few weeks ago, and I thought, wow, this is kind of how I've lived my life. I had a bucket list, but I didn't know what a bucket list was. It's about two guys that meet in hospital. They've both got 6 months to live with cancer. They share a room. And one of them decides to write this list, a bucket list. It's a list of all the things he wants to do before he dies. But he left it a bit late. Morgan Freeman's the guy that writes the list. Jack Nicholson picks the list up, and they go off on a journey around the world to go and see and do the things that they always wanted to do, but had left it until now. There are some really interesting parallels with real life here in this dramatization, because one of them is very wealthy. Jack Nicholson owns the hospital that they're in. He's made a huge amount of money, but he hasn't done some of the things he wanted to do in his life. And he certainly hasn't spent enough time with his family, particularly his daughter, that he didn't see or have contact with. So he'd sacrificed quite a lot to become very successful and very wealthy. Morgan Freeman was a car mechanic, very proud man and a good mechanic, but he worked very long hours. He had a great family life and spent a lot of time with his family, but he spent no time for himself. And so both of them, from two different spectrums of what some might call the success spectrum, the two different ends, had both had similar experiences in terms of what they wanted to do and hadn't done, and both had the flip side of that. Here's a few different things that I've cobbled together some pictures of stuff that I've spent most of my life doing. This was kind of a bucket list life, but I never knew that it was. I don't know how, and I don't know why. But as a child, I found things and people that motivated me and inspired me. I think a lot of people are easily inspired. We all are. You can read something in a newspaper, watch something on television or in a film, and be inspired. The problem is that that inspiration evaporates. Have you ever noticed how you can be really fired up about something? Rock climbing, mountaineering. I want to climb a mountain. I want to go to the Himalayas. I want to jump out of an aeroplane. I want to ride a motorbike, canoe, whatever it may be, free dive, horse ride, bodybuilding, whatever, hot air ballooning. I want to do it. And then all of a sudden, it evaporates. The next morning, it's, well, okay, what's for breakfast? Hubert's quote. Thank you. Now, it's taking action that's important. It's about doing something with it. It's about actually taking the next step. And a couple of things that I'd like to say about bucket lists generally. We read in magazines and in newspapers all the time, 50 things to do before you die, 50 things to see before you die. And that seems to be quite a common theme, and a lot of people do that. In the film, the guys wanted to skydive, so they went off and they did a tandem parachute jump. That's where you're strapped to the front of an instructor. The instructor does the parachute jump for you. You've had a morning of training, and really, it's a fairground ride. You don't really do anything, but look at the view and get very scared and sweat a lot. That's what most people do. I would suggest if any of you have got any form of bucket list, or if I can inspire you to go out and do something, I would urge you not to go and be an extreme sports, or whatever else it may be, tourist. Don't just turn up for the view. Don't be a tourist with a camera. Let someone strap you. Go and do a parachute course. If you want to jump out of an aeroplane, do an accelerated freefall course. Take a week or two, somewhere nice like Florida. Make the time. I'm sure some of you are saying, well, I haven't got the time to do that, can't afford to do that. You'll do it if you want to do it. You'll find a way to do it. And go and do a course and actually get into the sport. Become a skydiver in your own right. At the end of the course, you should be able to freefall, and you'll be allowed to jump out of an aeroplane on your own. I've always got into sports and started to learn about the people in the sport, the equipment in the sport, the history of the sport. I do a lot of reading around. This is a bit of an obsessional thing. I understand that. You might not all have that compulsive, obsessional part of your character. But if you can tap into a bit of it, you get so much more juice out of life. So don't just go and be a tourist. Don't just go and jump out of an aeroplane strapped to someone else. Go and learn to parachute, if parachuting is your thing. If you want to play a musical instrument, don't just go to a concert. That's great too. Go and sit down and learn that instrument that you always wanted to play. If you want to learn a language, go and learn a language. Take some part-time courses and start to learn a language. That's what I'm going to urge you to do, because I think that it enriches your whole life. And what's really exciting is once you start doing things like that, you find that it automatically inspires those people around you, family members, friends. It inspires people to do other things. And that's really powerful because it's spreading a lot of positive energy. Those of you that have seen Bucket List, I told you I thought it was my life when he said about the Himalayas. Happy are those who dream dreams and are ready to pay the price to make them come true. Well, I would say that some people will say, yeah, there is a price to pay. What about time away from my family? What about time away from my business and my career? But you know, I think there's a price to pay if you don't do some of these things. One of the biggest motivators I had was when I was a teenager. I went round to a girlfriend's house and her father sat there in a chair and said, oh, you know, what do you do with your spare time? Do you have any hobbies? I said, yeah, I'm really into canoeing. At the time I was canoeing, and I'm rock climbing. I do that every spare minute I get. And he looked wistfully out of the window and said, oh, I'd love to have done that. Oh, I'd love to go rock climbing. But you know now, he said, I'm a bit overweight, I've got responsibilities, coulda, shoulda, woulda. And there was a lot of regret there. And I don't know what it was about that one pivotal moment, but I made an instant decision I was never going to do that. I was never going to become 60, 70, 80 years of age, sit in a chair and say, oh, I really wish I jumped out of an aeroplane. I really wish I'd learned to play piano. I really wish. So there is a price to pay, and a price to pay if you don't do it. I spent quite a lot of time as a military reservist with Commando and Special Forces in the UK. And the reason I mention this is because that's a kind of a little bucket list life all in itself. You get to do a lot of really different stuff, and it's really good fun. Fortunately for me, it was during a peacetime army, so I didn't actually go to war. But I did a heck of a lot of training, loads of courses, and gained a lot of skills, which has led to my current career as a stuntman. What's interesting about this, and the reason I mention it, is there is a mentality that I come across all the time, and it disappoints me slightly. If people say, oh, you're the guy that's going to do that skydive, or you parachute, oh, I'd love to do that, but that's like way out there. You've got to be some sort of adrenaline junkie. You've got to be a crazy person. You've got to be supremely fit. I don't believe that. I really don't believe that. And I've always found it very hard to understand why people think it's a big thing to have done, to have climbed in the Himalayas, to have parachuted out of an aeroplane, to have canoed down rivers and waterfalls. Because in reality, it's just the same as any other hobby. Yes, there's a dangerous element. Yes, you kind of have to be reasonably fit for some of them, but you can really, really enjoy those things wherever you are, whoever you are, and whatever your body shape, age, sex, creed, how much money you've got, you can enjoy most of those things. So, the reason I mention this is because when you mix with military people, especially in an airborne or commando forces environment, those things are not unusual because everybody's doing it. And there is a really useful thing, and for some of you, this will be useful for your kids. It's about peer group pressure or peer group acceptance. If you're in a group of people who all do what most people consider to be extraordinary things, they're not extraordinary things anymore. If you're around athletes, I was involved in triathlon and running at club level for quite a long time. They didn't think it was exceptional to get up at 4 in the morning and do an interval training session and then do a hill training session later and then go for a long distance run of 18 miles. Most people said, yeah, 18 miles. But that's what we did. That's what the athletes in the club did. It wasn't unusual. And it's very, very easy to reframe and set the mind to start doing things once you start. And that's the important thing. You really have to start. This film, The Big Blue, I don't know how many of you have seen this, an absolutely beautiful Luc Besson film. It was one of the pivotal, inspirational moments for me. It was also a bit of a challenge, because I'd like to talk a little bit about fear, because I think a lot of us have fear with doing things, certainly with extreme sports. I came in late one night, I watched this film, and I was totally motivated. Now, I've done quite a lot of underwater stuff. I've done a lot of diving over the years. And to be frank, I'm quite frightened to be underwater. I've never been comfortable. I've done a lot of diving, and I've never been really comfortable in that environment. So the thought of holding your breath very deep underwater filled me with dread and fear. And yet the beauty of the underwater world, the serenity of it, attracted me. The adventure of it attracted me. So I thought, feel the fear and do it anyway, as the book says. I'm going to do this thing, because I think it's a personal challenge. So I did. I took 8 months out and tried to set the first British free dive record in no limits free diving, where you go down with a weight and you come up with a balloon. So it gets you down deep very quickly, which in some ways is psychologically more intimidating than just swimming there. I took about 8 months to do that, and it was an astonishing, astonishing journey. I watched the film and I took action, and this is what I'd like to impart. It's about taking action. Within 3 weeks of watching that film, I was on a course in the Greek islands, learning to free dive. I had a couple of friends, one in particular, who watched the film too and said, I love that film, I want to free dive. I said, come on this course, please come on this course. I urged him. He gave me every excuse why he couldn't come on this course. Oh, I'm busy. Oh, I've got family commitments. Oh, I've got this to do. I've got a party. He didn't go. And I really felt sorry for him. He was one of my best friends. I could not encourage him to come and do this thing. And I think he really missed out because it was a fantastic course. I went on to get the record, to set a record. And I've got to say that there were a lot of times when I was very, very scared during the whole of the time I was free diving. But I think if you overcome those things and if you face those fears, you get stronger. You'll have heard this, most of you, before, and it's so, so true. Whatever it is you do, if it's scary, meet it head on. Go straight out there and grab it with both hands and shake it. I urge you to do that, whatever it might be. It might be an emotional relationship problem. If you can do that, the power and the strength in that is incredible. And you go up a notch. And the next time you do it, you go up a notch. And you get to a stage where you feel as though you can do almost anything.